Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome to night 2 of the Mary Trump book, Too Much Never Enough. We're going to get started shortly. We had such a great turnout for the prologue. Now, originally, my thought was to read this book in order. But so that I don't get sued or accosted by the author, I'm going to read select chapters. And I also picked the chapters that I think are the most revealing and pertinent. A lot of the first half of the book deals with his early life, which is nice. I'm all about reading about the childhood traumas. But that's not what we're here for. Okay, we're here for the juice. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out night 1. A couple of people asked me to say this earlier in the video, but if you need the updates, you can click the bell at the top of the video for updates for the readings in Secretary of Shade on YouTube. Follow me on social media at Dapper Dan Midas, DAPPERDANMIDAS. If you feel compelled to contribute to the readings, you can also contribute via Cash App or Venmo. Same handle, Dapper Dan Midas. But we're going to get started. I'm going to skip to chapter 9. Wow, we already got 300 folks in. Hello, everybody. First off, thank you for joining in. Hi, Sonny. What's going on, Lamont? So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is chapter 9, The Art of the Bailout. Okay. Mary Trump mugged. The New York tabloid, subtle as ever, blared in 100-point font the day after Halloween 1991. Even though I already knew what had happened, it was jarring to see the headlines as I passed news kiosks on my way to the subway. My grandmother hadn't just been mugged, though. The kid who grabbed her purse in the grocery store parking lot as she loaded shopping bags into her Rolls Royce had slammed her head against the car with such force that her brain had hemorrhaged, as she had lost some sight and hearing. Damn. When she hit the pavement, her pelvis fractured in several places and ribs broke. Injuries that were no doubt more dangerous than they might have been if she hadn't had severe osteoporosis. By the time she arrived at Booth Memorial Hospital, her condition was grave, and we weren't sure if she was going to make it. It wasn't until she moved out of the intensive care unit and into a private room that her progress became visible, and it was weeks more before her pain became bearable. When her appetite started to come back, I took her whatever she wanted. One day she was drinking a butterscotch milkshake I'd picked up on the way when Donald showed up. Enter scene, bitch. He said hello to us both and kissed her quickly. Mom, you look great. She's doing much better, I said. He sat in the chair next to the bed and put a foot up on the edge of the bed frame. Murray's been visiting me every day, Gam said, smiling at me. He turned to me. Must be nice to have so much free time. Shade, bitch. Okay, so first off, bitch, you're trying that. Your mother damn near got killed loading groceries into her Rolls Royce, by the way. But nevertheless, rich people shop too. Your mother almost got killed, bitch. Your grandmother almost got killed. And you ain't even come visit. But that's another story for another day. I looked at Gam. She rolled her eyes, and I tried not to laugh. How are you, sweetheart? Gam asked him. Don't ask. He seemed annoyed. Gam asked him about his kids. If anything was new with him and Ivanka. He didn't have much to say. So this was when he was with Ivanka, bitch. He didn't have much to say, clearly bored. He left after 10 minutes or so. Gam glanced at the door to make sure he was gone. Somebody's cranky. So, bitch, first off, you only stayed for 10 minutes after your grandmother got the shit beat out of her. I can't. Okay. Now I did laugh. To be fair, he's having a tough time, I said. In the last 12 months, now mind you, this is where the plot thickens, bitch. This was in 91. In the last 12 months, the Taj Mahal, his favorite Atlantic City casino, had declared bankruptcy just a little over a year after it opened. His marriage was a disaster, thanks in part to his very public affair with Marla Maples. Oh, so I didn't know he was cheating on Ivanka with Marla, bitch. Okay, so Ivanka must have been first, and then Marla came, but Marla was the mistress, and then he ended up marrying Marla. It's too much. Okay. The banks had put him on an allowance, and the paperback version of his second book, Surviving at the Top, had been published under the title The Art of Survival. Despite the fact that he brought it all on himself, he seemed put upon rather than humbled or humiliated. Poor Donald, Grandma mocked. She seemed almost giddy, and I thought the hospital staff might need to cut back on her pain meds. He was always like this. I shouldn't say it, but when he went to the military academy, I was so relieved. He didn't listen to anyone, especially me, and he tormented Robert. And oh, Mary, he was such a slob. At school, he got medals for neatness. Then when he came home, he was still a slob. What did you do? What could I do? He never listened to me, and your grandfather didn't care. She shook her head. Donald got away with murder. That surprised me. I had always assumed my grandfather was a taskmaster. That doesn't sound like him. At the time, my grandfather was at the hospital for special surgery in Manhattan getting a hip replacement. Damn, her hip fucked up, her pelvis fucked up, her brain hemorrhaging, granddaddy got a hip replacement, everybody all the elders is fucked up in the game. I think he had only ever been in the hospital once, when he'd had a tumor on his neck near his right ear removed in '89. I don't know if the timing of his hip surgery was a coincidence or if it had been scheduled after Grandma was admitted so she wouldn't have to deal with him while she recovered. His mental state had been deteriorating for some time, and while he was in the hospital, had definitely taken a turn for the worse. A few times late at night, the nurses found him trying to leave wearing only boxer shorts. He told them he was going to find Mrs. Trump. Grandma seemed pretty happy not to be found. So obviously, Granddad has dementia. Grandma like, bitch, I'm glad these people tried to rob my ass, bitch, and knock my pelvis out because I don't feel like dealing with your grandfather. They is a trick. This family is a key, bitch. Donald's perceived success with the Grand Hyatt in 1980 had paved the way for Trump Tower, which had opened to great fanfare in '83. From his reportedly abysmal treatment of the undocumented workers who built it to the alleged mob involvement, the project was steeped in controversy. So, bitch, we already know, bitch, you want to build a wall and shit, but the same undocumented workers that built Trump Tower, bitch. The shame. This family is fucking ghetto, bitch. They banned you. This is a Jerry Springer episode, but with money. The affronts culminated in the destruction of the beautiful Art Deco limestone reliefs on the facade of the Bonwit Teller building, which he raised to make room for his. Donald had promised those historically significant artifacts to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Realizing that removing them in one piece would cost money and slow down construction, he instead ordered that they be destroyed. So, bitch, you got historic artifacts that you were supposed to be given to the Met, bitch. That's why they had a Met Gala for, those who don't know, who don't care. But that's why they had a Met Gala. You're supposed to be given historic artifacts and shit, bitch. You like, fuck that. It costs too much money. Throw that shit in the trash. That's basically what it is. It's like when your mother come and clean up your room and you be like, no, Ma, don't throw that away. And then she just start throwing everything away. That's basically what it is. When confronted with that breach of trust and taste, he shrugged it off, declaring the sculptures to be without artistic merit, as if he knew better than the considered experts' assessment of the experts. Over time, that attitude that he knew better would become even more entrenched. As his knowledge base has decreased, particularly in areas of governing, his claims to know everything have increased in direct proportion to his insecurity, which is where we are now. The real reason Donald's first two projects were acquired and developed relatively smoothly was in large part because of his brother Fred's expertise as a developer and deal maker. Neither would have been possible without his contacts, influence, approval, money, knowledge, and maybe most important, endorsement of Donald. Before that point, Donald had relied entirely on Fred's money and influence, although he never acknowledged it and publicly credited his own wealth and savvy for his success. The media were more than happy to go along without question, and the banks followed suit when Donald started to pursue the idea of becoming a casino operator in New Jersey, which in 1977 had legalized gambling in Atlantic City in an effort to save the flailing seaside resort town. If my grandfather's opinion had carried any weight with him, Donald would have never invested in Atlantic City. Manhattan was worth the risk, as far as Fred was concerned, but in Atlantic City, he would have nothing except money and advice to offer, no political clout or knowledge of the industry to draw on. By then, Fred's influence over him was waning, and in '82, Donald applied for his gaming license. So Donald a fucking idiot, okay, making fucking knee-jerk decisions and shit. While her brother was casting about for investment opportunities, Marianne, who had been an assistant district attorney in New Jersey since the mid-'70s, asked Donald if he would ask Roy Cohn to do him a favor. Cohn had enough clout with the Reagan administration that he was given access to AZT, an experimental AIDS treatment, as well as influence over judicial appointments. So, bitch, you mean to tell me the tea is getting spilled, bitch. So, everybody else dying, but because you doing you good girlfriends, they wouldn't even give Rock Hudson the shit. Remember, I don't know if you know the story of Rock Hudson, how he begged Nancy Reagan to help him. He had AIDS, and Nancy wouldn't help him. But it all come down to the money, okay? It all come down to the money. It all come down to favors, okay? Conveniently, a seat was open in the U.S. District Court for the new District of New Jersey. Now, this is Marianne. Marianne, if you remember from the first chapter when we discussed the prologue, we read that. Marianne is the judge that know Donald full of shit but still voted for him out of loyalty. Now we getting ready to find out why the fuck Marianne was so goddamn loyal, bitch. Marianne thought it would be a great fit, and Donald thought it might be useful to have a close relative on the bench in a state in which he planned to do a lot of business. Cohn gave Attorney General Ed Meese a call, and Marianne was nominated in September and confirmed in October, bitch. These are your judges. I'm going to read this paragraph again. So, Marianne, you ain't shit. No shit. Mary Trump is spilling all of the tea, bitch. So, a seat was open in the U.S. District Court of New Jersey. Marianne, his cousin, wanted to be the judge. Donald's like, all right, bitch, we need, it'll be a good look for me to have a judge because I'm getting ready to do all this casino shit in New Jersey, okay? Roy Cohn, okay, who had been an assistant, I don't know if he would ask Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, who was good girlfriends with the Reagans. So let's plot this out. Marianne Cousin, okay? Marianne Cousin wants to be a judge, okay? Marianne talks to Donald. Donald's like, okay, Marianne, I am getting ready to do business in New Jersey. Let me call my homeboy Roy Cohn, who I'm good girlfriends with. He good girlfriends with the Reagans. They done gave him free AIDS drugs and shit. So I'm going to give him a call. Roy Cohn, because we good girlfriends and we did this favor, he going to call the Attorney General and we going to go ahead and nominate Marianne for this district court seat and slide her in there. Marianne is the sister. Y'all right, I'm sorry. But just to see how this shit works. Marianne is the sister. I'm sorry, y'all. I stand corrected. But this shit is crazy. to me. I think this whole scenario is just like ill, and it shows how power structures work, especially when we're living in a time of people exposing systemic racism and things like that. Now we understand why Marianne still voted, even though she knew he wasn't qualified. Why Marianne didn't come out as a judge, who would have been a big, that would have been a big allegation. Okay? That's crazy to me. That's crazy to me. And yet another sign of Fred's waning influence, Donald had purchased a $300 million plus casino that would become Trump's castle sight unseen in '85, only a year after he had bought Harrah's, which became Trump Plaza. For Donald, too much of a good thing was a better thing. Atlantic City had unlimited potential, he believed, so 2 casinos were better than one. By then, Donald's ventures already carried billions of dollars in debt. By 1990, his personal obligation would balloon to $975 million. Okay? Even so, that same year, he bought Mar-a-Lago for $8 million. The infamous Mar-a-Lago, bitch. Okay? So he bought Mar-a-Lago for $8 million. In 1988, he bought a yacht for $29 million. And then, in '89, the Eastern Airlines shuttle for $365 million. In 1990, he'd had to issue almost $700 million in junk bonds, carrying a 14% interest rate, just to finish construction on his third casino, the Taj Mahal. It seemed as if the sheer volume of purchases, the price tags of the acquisitions, and the audacity of the transactions kept everybody, including the banks, from paying attention to his fast accumulating debt and questionable business acumen. Back then, Donald's favorite color scheme was red, black, and gold, so Atlantic City's cheap glitz appealed to him almost as much of the allure of easy money. The house always wins, after all, and it was a good bet that anybody who can afford the buy-in would do well there. Atlantic City was completely outside of Fred's purview, which also appealed to Donald. Setting aside the massive monetary investments made by Fred and others, operating the casino, unlike the Grand Hyatt and Trump Tower, which were development projects that were ultimately managed by other entities, would be an ongoing business. As such, it would have been Donald's first opportunity to succeed independently of his father. Having his own casino provided Donald an outsized canvas. He could tailor the entire world to his specifications. And if one casino was good, 2 would be better, and 3 even better. Of course, his casinos were competing with one another and eventually would be cannibalizing one another's profits. You goddamn dummy. As absurd as it was, there was a certain logic to his wanting more. After all, it had worked for his father, but Donald didn't understand and refused to learn that owning and running casinos were vastly different from owning and running rental properties in Brooklyn, from the business model and the market to the customer base and the calculus involved. Because he couldn't see that glaring distinction, it was easy for him to believe that more was better in Atlantic City, just as it had been for my grandfather in New York's Outer Boroughs. If one casino was a cash cow, 3 would be a herd of them. He would do with casinos what Fred had done with the apartment buildings. The only part of the scenario that defies explanation is the fact that the banks and investors in his first 2 casinos didn't object more strenuously to his opening the third, which would cut into their own bottom lines. It made even less sense that he could find anybody interested in investing in it. Even a casual glance at the numbers, not least the debt service, should have scared the most reckless lender away. In the late 80s, nobody said no to Donald. thereby legitimatizing another misguided project that had the ancillary benefit of bolstering the ego of a man who had no way of making it to succeed. So here's my thing. Let's unpack this section real quick. Your black ass gotta jump through hoops to borrow $40,000 to buy a damn car. You gotta show pay stubs. Your credit gotta be A1 to do all of that. This is actually, it's so crazy. This is a masterclass in privilege. It's a masterclass. His own niece just laid out how the shit was tanking. It was not a good business decision. But because it's Donald Trump, because he's a part of that good old boys club, living off the reputation of his brother and his father, because he got the gift of gab, because he's white, the bank's just going to go and give him the money. But you had gone through hell and high water. You can't even get a new iPhone before you close on your house, because one hit gonna fuck all your shit up. Okay? And then fast forward, and what, after 2008, when everything crashed, the banks get a bailout. But these same banks making these goddamn decisions, lending millions of dollars to one individual. That shit is crazy. In August of that year, Surviving at the Top was published, and within weeks, it would become clear that the book's subject matter and timing were bad enough to qualify as a parody. In June 1990, Donald missed a $43 million payment for Trump's castle. Bitch, they charging me a late fee for $20 on my Amex. $43 million. 6 months later, my grandfather sent his chauffeur with more than $3 million in cash to purchase chips at Trump Castle. In other words, he bought the chips with no intention of gambling with them. His driver simply put them in a briefcase and left the casino. Even that wasn't enough. The next day, my grandfather wired another $150,000 to the castle, presumably for more chips. Although those maneuvers helped temporarily, they resulted in my grandfather's having to pay a $30,000 fine for violating the Gaming Commission rule prohibiting unauthorized financial sources from lending money to casinos. So here's what he did, bitch. Here's what he did. The casino tanking. He missing payments. Granddad goes and tries to circumvent the system. He can't outright lend the casino the money, so he goes and buys a bunch of chips that he's not going to do shit with to try to circumvent the system. Okay? If he wanted to continue lending Donald money to keep his casinos afloat, which he did, he will also be required to get a gaming license in New Jersey. But it was too late. Donald might have controlled 30% of Atlantic City's market share, but the Taj was making it impossible for his two other casinos to make money. The Plaza and the Castle lost a combined $58 million the year the Taj opened. The three properties carried $94 million in annual debt, and the Taj alone needed to pull in more than $1 million a day to break even, bitch. To break even, it needed to make $1 million a day. Okay? Now, for those of you on the East Coast, it ain't that many goddamn bus trips from DC and Baltimore to Atlantic City in your life to make $1 million a day, bitch. I don't care how many senior citizens you bust, give them free Coke in a can and a few chips and a food voucher, bitch. You ain't making $1 million a day off of Agnes and them. You're just not. Okay? The banks were bleeding money. Just as the Taj was opening, Donald and his lenders were meeting to try to figure out how to rein in and manage his spending. The possibility of more defaults and bankruptcy still loomed, and a solution had to be found that would protect Donald's image, which in turn would protect the bank's money. Without the veneer of success and confidence he projected, and he had projected for him, okay, the bankers feared that his properties, already in trouble, would lose even more value. His last name was the draw. Without the name, there would be no new gamblers or tenants or people willing to buy bonds, and hence no new revenue. So here's how your banks do. Your bankers, they found out he ain't shit. But now they done kissed his ass and been dumb, did dumb shit for so long, now they in the pickle. Okay? Now they in the pickle. So, if your black ass go bankrupt, once again, okay, let's keep it 100. Any person of color, you go bankrupt, bitch, the banks is not protecting your ass. They not helping you save face. Your ass can't make them car payments, bitch. You hiding your car around the corner, hiding your car in the garage of your girlfriend's house till you can make the next payment so they don't come repossess your shit. The banks is not helping your ass. But they'll help him. Okay? In addition to fronting Donald the money to cover his business's operating expenses, the banks reached an agreement with him in May of 1990 to put him on a $450,000 a month allowance. That is almost $5.5 million a year for having failed miserably. So even after this shit was crazy, they were still giving him $450,000 a month an allowance. No wonder she said he was failing upward. That money was just for personal expenses. The Trump Tower triplex apartment, the private jet, the mortgage on Mar-a-Lago. In order to sell his image, Donald needed to be able to continue living a lifestyle that bolstered it. In order for the banks to keep tabs on him, Donald had to meet with them every Friday to report on his expenditures as well as progress he'd made selling assets such as the yacht. In May of 1990, there was no denying how dire the situation was. As much as Donald complained to Robert that the banks were killing him, the truth was that he was beholden to them in a way he'd never been to his father. He had never been on a leash before, let alone a short one, and it chafed. He was legally obligated to pay the banks back, and if he didn't, there would be consequences. At least there should have been. Okay? Despite the restrictions, Donald continued spending cash he didn't have, including $250,000 for Marla's engagement ring. This the bitch he was cheating on Ivanka with that became his second wife, Marla Maples Trump, okay? And $10 million to Ivanka as part of the divorce settlement. I don't think it ever occurred to him that he couldn't spend whatever he wanted no matter what the circumstances. The banks admonished him for betraying their agreement, but they never took any action against him, which just reinforced his belief that he could do whatever he wanted, as he almost always had. In a way, you can't really blame Donald. In Atlantic City, he had become unmoored from his need for his father's approval or permission. He no longer needed to talk himself up. His exaggerated assessment of himself was simultaneously fueled and validated by banks that were throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at him and a media that lavished him with attention and unwarranted praise. The two combined rendered him blind to how dire his situation was. My grandfather's myths about Donald were now being reinforced by the world at large. Regardless of who was disseminating them, however, they were still myths. Donald was, in essence, still Fred's construct. Now he belonged to the banks and the media. He was both enabled by and dependent upon them, just as he had been upon Fred. He had a streak of superficial charm, even charisma, that sucked certain people in. When his ability to charm hit a wall, he deployed another business strategy, throwing tantrums during which he threatened to bankrupt or otherwise ruin anybody who failed to let him have what he wanted. Either way, he won. Sound familiar? Donald was successful because he was a success. That was a premise that ignored one fundamental reality. He had not achieved and could not achieve what he was being credited with. Despite that, his ego, now unleashed, had to be fed continuously. Not just by his family, but by all who encountered it. New York's elite would never accept him as anything but the court jester from Queens, but they also validated his pretensions and grandiose self-image by inviting him to their parties and allowing him to frequent their haunts, such as Le Club. The more New Yorkers wanted spectacle, the more willing the media were to provide it, even at the expense of more important and substantive stories. Why bore them with hard-to-follow articles about his convoluted bank transactions? The distractions and sleights of hand benefited Donald enormously while giving him exactly what he wanted. The ongoing adulation of media that focused on his salacious divorce and alleged sexual prowess. If the media could deny reality, so could he. Crazy. First off, they called him a court jester from Queens, bitch. I can't. Okay? She called him a court jester from Queens. But it's so crazy. The banks and the media are enabling this. It's crazy. By some miracle, I had gotten into Tufts University after boarding school. And despite dropping out the second semester of my freshman year, I graduated in '89. A year later, just before my grandfather's modest purchase of a $3.15 million worth of casino chips, I entered the graduate program in English and Comparative Literature at Columbia University. 2 months after the semester started, my apartment was burglarized. All of my electronics, including my typewriter, which is essential for school, was taken. When I called Irwin to see if I can get an advance on my allowance, he refused. My grandfather thought I should get a job, he told me. The next time I visited my grandfather at the house, I explained the situation to her, and she offered to write me a check. It's okay, Grandma. Only have to wait a couple of weeks. Mary, she said, never reject the gift of money. She wrote me the check, and I was able to buy a typewriter later that week. So let's take a look at this. My homie Dominique Morgan brought this up a few months ago when the stimulus checks hit. Now you see what that lady said? This lady is rich beyond our means. And she said, never reject the gift of money. But our ass is out here, oh bitch, I don't get a stimulus check. I don't need a stimulus check. But these rich folks is out here, they not going to turn down no goddamn money. And they're going to tell you, take the money. Meanwhile, your poor ass too proud to beg. Okay? These rich folks ain't too proud to beg no TLC, bitch. I soon got an angry call from Irwin. Did you ask your grandmother for money? Not exactly, I said. I told her I got robbed and she helped me out. While going through the canceled checks of all his personal business accounts, as well as my grandmother's, as he did at the end of every month, my grandfather had discovered the check my grandmother had written to me, and he was furious. Now, he giving Donald all this money, buying millions in chips to casinos. This girl is in school, trying to get an education, better herself. She gets robbed, and he like, bitch, get a job. Crazy. You need to be careful, Irwin warned me. Your grandfather often speaks of disowning you. I got another call from Irwin a few weeks later. This must be their accountant. My grandfather was angry with me again, this time because he didn't like the signature with which I endorsed my checks. Erwin, you've got to be kidding. I'm not. He hates the fact that it's illegible. It's a signature. He paused and softened his tone. Change it. Mary, you've got to play the game. Your grandfather thinks you're being selfish, and there may be nothing left by the time you turn 30. Excuse me. But I never understood what he meant by the game. It was my family, not a bureaucracy. I don't see what I'm doing wrong. I'm getting a master's degree at an Ivy League university. He doesn't care. Does Donald know about this? Yes. He's my trustee. What does he have to say? Donald, Erwin laughed. Nothing. My grandfather hadn't yet been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, but he'd been struggling with dementia for a while by then. So I didn't take the threats too seriously. I did, however, change my signature. So, Granddaddy, like, look, bitch, I don't like the way you sign these checks. Now, he already got dementia. He got a broke hip, dementia, and still trying to talk shit. Okay? Everyone in my family experienced a strange combination of privilege and neglect. Although I had all of the material things I needed and luxuries such as private schools and summer camp, there was a purposely built-in idea of uncertainty that any of it would last. By the same token, there was the sometimes dispiriting and sometimes devastating sense that nothing any of us did really mattered, or worse, that we didn't matter. Only Donald did. Trump management, which Donald often referred to as a two-bit operation, was doing fairly well. Fred paid himself more than $109 million between 88 and 93 and had tens of millions more in the bank, so Fred was killing it. The Trump Organization, the company Donald ostensibly ran, was, however, in increasingly serious trouble. Reduced to a monthly allowance that a family of 4 could have lived on comfortably for 10 years, but still an allowance, and shut out by the banks, which finally refused to lend him more money, Donald fully believed that whatever was happening to him was the result of the economy, the poor treatment he received from the banks, and bad luck. Nothing was ever fair to him. That struck a chord in Fred, who nursed his own grievances and also never took responsibility for anything other than his successes. So that shit runs in the family. Donald's talent for deflecting responsibility while projecting blame onto others came straight from his father's playbook. Even with the untold millions of dollars Fred spent, he couldn't prevent Donald's failures. But he could certainly find a scapegoat, just as he had always done when his missteps and poor judgment caught up with him, as when he blamed Freddie for the failure of Steeplechase. Donald knew that taking responsibility for your failures, which obviously meant acknowledging failure, was not something Fred admired. This is Granddad. He's seen where it got in Freddie. It's very possible that back in the late 1960s and early 70s, Fred didn't know just how deep Donald's ineptitude ran. Acknowledging weakness of any kind in the son on whom he had staked the future of his empire and for whom he had sacrificed Freddie would have been nearly impossible. It was much easier to convince himself that Donald's talents were wasted in the backwater of Brooklyn. He simply needed a bigger pond in which to make a splash. As the Commodore Hotel slowly transformed into the Grand Hyatt, Fred was so blinded by the success which Donald manipulated and debased every part of the process in order to get his own way that he seemed to forget how vital his own connections, knowledge, and skills were. Neither the Hyatt nor Trump Tower would have seen the light of day without them. Even Fred's head must have been turned by all of the attention Donald generated for 2 projects that, if developed by anybody else, would have been considered fairly commonplace occurrences in Manhattan. Fred had known all along what games Donald was playing because he taught Donald how to play them. This is Daddy. Working the refs, lying, cheating. As far as Granddad was concerned, those were all legitimate business tactics. The most effective game for both father and son was the shell game. While Fred kept churning out projects and solidifying his status as a post-war master builder, he was fattening his wallet with taxpayer money by skimming off the top and allegedly committing so much tax fraud that 4 of his children would continue to benefit from it for decades. That's why he don't want to show them goddamn taxes. So he learned this is a family operation. This is giving family ties, bitch. Okay? At the end of the day. Family ties. The difference between the two, however, okay, while the Rubes focused on the salacious details Donald kept generating for the tabloids, he was building a reputation for success based on bad loans, bad investment, and worse judgment. The difference between the two is that despite his dishonesty and lack of integrity, Fred actually ran a solid income-generating business, while Donald had only his ability to spend and his father's money to prop up an illusion. Once Donald moved into Atlantic City, there was no longer any denying that he wasn't just ill-suited to the day-to-day grind of running a few dozen middle-class rental properties in the Outer Boroughs. He was ill-suited to running any kind of business at all, even one that ostensibly played to his strengths of self-promotion and self-aggrandizement and his taste for glitz. When Fred bragged about Donald's brilliance and claimed that his son's success had far outpaced his own, he must have known that not a word of it was true. He was too smart and too good at arithmetic to think otherwise. The numbers simply didn't add up. But the fact that Fred continued to prop Donald up, despite the wisdom of continuing to do so, suggests that something else was going on. Because Fred did deny the reality on the ground in Atlantic City, he had already shown himself impervious to facts that he didn't fit his narrative. So he blamed the banks and the economy and the casino industry just as ferociously as his son did. Fred had become so invested in the fantasy of Donald's success that he and Donald were inextricably linked. Facing reality would have required acknowledging his own responsibility, which he would never do. He had gone all in, and although any rational person would have folded, Fred was determined to double down. There was still plenty of publicity to turn Fred's head, and thanks to the banks that father and son maligned, the extraordinary financial reversal didn't put a dent in Donald's lifestyle. Finally, there was the slow-rolling toll that his as-yet undiagnosed Alzheimer's was beginning to take on his executive functioning. Already susceptible to believe in the best of his worst son, it became easier over time for him to confuse the hype about Donald with reality. As usual, the lesson Donald learned was that one supported his pre-existing assumption. No matter what happens, no matter how much damage he leaves in the wake, he will be okay. Knowing ahead of that time that you're going to be bailed out if you fail renders the narrative leading up to that moment meaningless. Claim that a failure is a tremendous victory and the shameless grandiosity will retroactively make it so. That guaranteed that Donald would never change, even if he were capable of changing, because he simply didn't need to. It also guaranteed a cascade of increasingly consequential failures that will ultimately render all of us collateral damage. Okay. So, what we're learning here is that this is a family business. Let's unpack this. This is a family business. This is something that he's learned from his father he's been enabled his whole life. And honestly, to me, I mean, even though Murray writing this book, I'm like, well, Murray, what did you have going on? I mean, you are writing this book, but are you completely innocent, bitch? Like, what kind of deal, what you have going on? I always am skeptical about folks when they write books like this, because it's like you're painting yourself as, you know, this outsider looking in. But sis, what did you have going on? Okay? And it's interesting to me because it shows how, for poor people or people without means, you're told to do the right thing. Trust in the system. You feel bad, or society or government tries to make you feel bad. If you miss filing your taxes for a year, you get hit with all kind of penalties. You nervous, they garnishing your check. But that applies to poor people. Okay? And this is what this book is teaching me. Because ultimately, these corporations, these companies, they do what they want to do. You have a whole system of banks. This man is almost $2 billion in debt at this time from this chapter. And they actually paid to help him keep up appearances. But you're told, work hard. You shouldn't apply for government assistance. Oh, you're on welfare? Oh, you don't need a stimulus check. You don't need unemployment. Why do you need unemployment? What did you do to get fired? Okay? And it's interesting looking inside behind the curtain, you know? So what did we learn from this chapter? What did we learn? And this chapter is pretty lengthy, so I read most of it. It's like a few more left. What did we learn from this? Rich people don't turn down money, while your poor ass is turning down money. And we know rich people don't turn down money because look at them small business loans. When they put out that report of who got the loans. Senators, congressmen, big business owners, celebrities. They got the loans. Meanwhile, your neighborhood carryout that everybody know and love, the paperwork was so goddamn convoluted and the process was so damn sketchy, they didn't get a goddamn dime. We live in a country where they bailed out the banks for being irresponsible, doing shit like what we read about tonight. But they want their money back, though, for the unemployment that people got that they shouldn't have got. They want that back. But they'll bail out Bank of America. Okay? This is very telling, and this is why we all need to be involved in the processes. We all need to make sure we vote. I don't give a fuck if you don't like Biden. Fuck him. Shit. Fuck him. I don't even think he's doing a good job campaigning right now. But fuck it. We gotta get him out of here. We gotta get Trump out of here. Okay? That's all I'm saying. Now, we are going to reconvene on Sunday. I haven't done a good Sunday supper reading in quite some time. So I'm going to have time to read more through the book, pick out a chapter that I think is something we need to take a look at. And we're going to reconvene Sunday at 7 p.m. sharp. Once again, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you click the bell at the top for notifications. follow me on social media at Dapper Dan Midas. Also, I'm on Venmo and Cash App at Dapper Dan Midas if you want to contribute. That's DAPPERDANMIDAS. I do thank you guys for the outpouring of support. We're heading into the weekend for my Baltimore residents. It's kind of sad right now because Artscape will be taking place this weekend. However, due to COVID-19, we going to be sitting on the porch. Okay? With that being said, thank you for tuning in. We had a great number of viewers tonight, over 700, almost 800 tonight. Wow. I thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate your support, sitting with me and reading this and unpacking and all of that. With that being said, you guys have a blessed evening, a great weekend, and I will see you Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next read. Y'all have a good night. Oh, they should play like news music, right? Like that ending, bitch. That ending sent me. I was like, I want to hear the Peter Jennings music in the background, like just now. Like that shit sent me. All right, bye, y'all.